Hey everyone, today I'm going to cover my thoughts on three couples from Love Is Blind Habibi. For this video, I'll only be focusing on the three couples who didn't make it to the altar, and so we'll be looking at Karma and Ammar, Hajar and Simo, and Nour and Mido. So first, let's start with Karma and Ammar. In the show, Karma is introduced to us saying that her soulmate should be strong and know how to handle a strong woman because she describes herself as a strong woman. She meets Ammar, who is a dentist from Syria, and they seem to hit it off right away, except for one thing. Karma mentions that she likes to go dancing in her spare time, which raises a red flag with Ammar, who tells her that he doesn't like that. But instead of discussing this topic more and resolving it, they change the subject and bond over their love for traditional Oriental music. Karma does say in her interview that she likes Ammar but is concerned over him not accepting her dancing. I just don't understand why they didn't sort this issue out right there and then when it was obviously a problem, and their time in the pods is supposed to be dedicated towards sorting through such issues. But shockingly, they don't talk about dancing again in the pods. Instead, Ammar really falls for Karma to the extent where he returns to the men's quarters and shares his love for her with Shafiq, who he has become really close with, and asks Shafiq to cancel Karma so he is the only man she speaks with. And Shafiq agrees to this and actually does close the door for him and Karma. But this just demonstrates how infatuated he became with this girl from the very start. On Ammar and Karma's second date in the pods, Ammar has gifted Karma a list of his favorite songs for her to enjoy on a piece of paper, which he also sprayed with his cologne. Even though Ammar has his eyes set on Karma, she still has 3 dates remaining, which he feels jealous of, but they end their time singing a song together rather than discussing any critical topics about their lifestyles or their values, which again I see as problematic because they're giving themselves a weak foundation to stand on with each other. Anyway, Ammar is smitten with Karma. He thinks they have a lot in common. He feels similar to her and at ease when speaking to her. In their next date, he gives her with a teddy bear and she names it Ammar. It's pretty clear Ammar is dead set on Karma way more than she is on him, though, because she believes more time is needed. But I do want to note that they appear to look like a couple, like a good couple, just based on how much they are smiling and laughing with each other. Um, while speaking to each other in the pods. They got along so well that I totally forgot about the dancing issue that came up in the start. On their next date, Ammar and Karma asks Karma if she is as sure about him as he is about her, and Karma says she thinks their feelings develop too fast and she thinks that more time is needed. She thinks that what she's feeling is more excitement rather than love, and she thinks that they went too fast, so she felt like she got cold feet. But rather than talking more about this comment, Ammar just goes ahead and pops the question to her and she says yes in the pods. I don't know if the editing cut out some of the conversation, but I just thought this was a weird shift where she mentioned that they rushed and she has cold feet and then all of a sudden he proposes and she says yes. I feel like Ammar was just blinded by love, whereas Karma probably had concerns in the back of her mind, but thought maybe they could come to terms with their differences as they continued to get to know each other, which was a mistake because Ammar doesn't seem to be the type of guy to change his perspective, as he literally introduces himself as a traditional man. Their face to face reveal is successful, and they're both super excited when they see each other for the first time. Karma describes Ammar as handsome, and Ammar puts her engagement ring on and kisses her on the forehead. We then move on to the next phase of the experiment where the couples vacation at a resort. Karma and Ammar really seem like a couple in love, especially Ammar, who literally does not stop smiling at her. He tells her he will do his best to make her happy and keep her smiling, but then his conservative side starts to show. He tells her she needs to change her character a bit, that she can't act the way she does with him, with everybody, which she interprets as being flirty. He tells her, and I quote, "A woman should be flirtatious with her husband only," to which he basically says she already knew that. And I feel like there's some insecurity within Ammar if he's concerned about her personality. I don't think at this point he's seen her being flirty or inappropriate with anyone else, so it's a little odd to tell someone you're seeing and tell them you can only act this way with me and no one else. Like, duh, obviously. But anyway, they go on a boat ride, and Ammar and them are just lovey. Ammar and Karma are just lovey dovey. Ammar describes her as being a wise person who he understands, and she understands what he wants, but we rarely get to see them having any difficult conversations where they talk about real life matters. It's like they're just stuck in La La Land. They're very poetic towards each other, and he compares her to the sea and being calm. But then Karma says the decision is still uncertain for the two of them. She says maybe things will become clearer in the coming days before the experiment ends, and if they still haven't decided, then it's no biggie. Ammar just looks confused, but we don't get more of the conversation as the show cuts to another couple. When we come back to the couple, the two are sitting to eat, and Ammar tells her he likes her because she is old fashioned, like she has old fashioned characteristics. I don't see what's so old fashioned about her. She seems pretty modern to me, but anyway, he talks about how the old fashioned relationships were better, love was more beautiful because everyone had their own social role, which was different from each other. It just seems like he's projecting at this point. He then brings up how he is very much a traditional man. He says he doesn't want to control her, but there are specific things he would like from her. He asks her what she studied in school, and she says marketing. She talks about how she found a balance in business, theater, and dancing. Ammar then tells her that she should focus more on business, and she tells him she can do both. Ammar then asks her to explain what she means and what she will do in theater. And Karma says acting. He brings up her dancing again and says she can dance in front of a mirror, but not in front of people. He clearly tells her that he will not accept her being a dancer. That's like impossible for him to accept. He stands his ground on not accepting that at all, and he says it's like a big X for him. Karma tries to defend her dancing, saying there are many different types of dances and not all are the same, but Ammar says they are all unacceptable for him because he can't accept his wife being a dancer. And this is so frustrating because this issue existed in their very first pods meeting. I'm not too upset with Ammar being super conservative and traditional. Like, if those are your values and expectations, then sure, go ahead and stick by them. But to have made it this far with this woman who is clearly a free spirit, for lack of a better term, just to get hung up over the same topic as day one is just such a huge waste of time because it's clearly a deal breaker and it always was a deal breaker, but they continue to move forward because they didn't want to have any hard conversations with each other. Karma is confused as to why he cannot accept dancing, and he insists she looks at it from his perspective since she will be his wife and partner. He tells her, and I quote, "You can't do anything that I don't approve of or don't like." And I'm sorry, now he's coming off as extremely toxic and controlling. Karma tries to explain her perspective about how dance is really important to her, and to take it out of her life would be very difficult. And I think it's just really hypocritical for him to tell her to try to see things from his perspective, but he won't see things from hers. Like he's just coming off as very overbearing. She says they could come to an understanding. She's just hoping to change him basically, but it's not working. They're just very different in terms of their values. Ammar tells her he gets angry when someone argues with him like this. He says, "When I tell you I don't like something, you're supposed to say okay," which is such a red flag. I know before I said it's okay for him to stick to his values, but to push his values down someone else's throat the way he's doing to Karma, I just can't agree with this approach. He really lost all his appeal for me here. He said before that he wasn't trying to control her, and here we are moments later saying, and he's basically saying, literally, it's my way or the highway. Karma says this isn't a decision that should be made hastily because it's a big topic, but it seems pretty clear that there isn't going to be any flexibility from Ammar's side, so I don't know why they didn't just end it here. I literally do not understand why they keep dragging on. Since day one, dancing has been a huge X for Ammar, and he said that again and again, and yet they still don't end it here. We move on to the next phase of the experiment where the couples return to their normal lives, but you can see there's been some damage because Karma and Ammar, they both have been busy with work and haven't had a chance to talk to each other. Karma shares that they haven't even been talking much over the phone because they like to save their conversations for their dates, which I thought was odd. It just comes off as a major communication failure because it only creates more distance between the two, in my opinion. And I think that distance really did come from their discussion of their differences. But they finally meet for coffee, and Ammar tells her she didn't invite him over and, she wasn't thinking about him at all. To which Karma says, "Oh, well, you were busy with work." And Ammar then says she's always just giving excuses. Karma asks him if, she had called, would he have come? And Ammar's like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I have come?" This just shows that the distance is probably initiated more from Karma's end, which I don't blame her because her relationship with Ammar has turned out to be him trying to cage a bird from flying away. Basically, that's the vibe. Finally, the topic of Karma's dancing comes up. They first establish where Ammar stands on the issue, that it is a big no from him. He goes as far as to say that he doesn't think any man will accept it, and this is a reflection of the society that they live in. Orma basically says, let's just focus on you first. And she decides that they should call it off because she chooses dance, art, and her life. Ammar then goes, quote, "So you sacrificed our relationship for dancing?" And she says no, as he was the one who marked an X on the topic of dancing, which is like true. It's like he's the one who kind of closed the door there. Ammar tells her that he thinks her life will be difficult if she wants everything in her life to be perfect and suit her, which is so ironic coming from him because he's the one who's literally trying to make everything suit him. But he thinks it won't work for her. He says she gave up love for this trivial issue, and that's not right. But Karma tells him that everyone in the world has their own identity, that's what makes them who they are, that it's not a trivial issue for her, and is a big part of her life, and she's right. For Ammar to expect her to give a part of herself up for a relationship is kind of mind-boggling. Ammar basically tells her it isn't acceptable in their society, and that as an Arab man, he cannot accept it. Ammar says in his interview that he doesn't think Karma will find a man with the views she holds now, and they break up and choose to go their separate ways. Karma says she loves her spirit more than anything and that God created her free. We get a scene of her dancing. She thinks the best choice one can make is to be true to themselves, and she's right. Ammar was wrong for dismissing her dancing as a trivial subject because she had previously communicated multiple times that it was something important to her, that it was part of her identity. He can't seem to understand this because he is super traditional and conservative, but it also shows he's incredibly closed minded because he didn't even try to look at things from her perspective. It was literally his way or no way, and it's good that their relationship ended here because in a healthy marriage, you can't be that domineering of a figure. He really did seem like he would have been super controlling as a partner, and I don't like how he was trying to hide behind his quote values because the real problem was his inability to compromise or to even see things from her perspective. So that wraps up my thoughts on Karma and Ammar. Let's move on to Simo and Hajar. At the beginning, Simu's actually torn between Hajar and Yasmin, so I'll cover some of that too. So, Simu is a 34-year-old from Morocco who works in a real estate family business. What's funny is that he says in his opening interview that he's single because he needs to work on himself and acknowledges that he's made a lot of mistakes and wants to correct them. But despite this statement, he fails to show any positive change or progress from how he initially described himself because from the very start, he comes off as rude and impatient with all his dates in the pods. He barely gives the women any time to speak because as soon as he gets upset over something that they said or, um, basically gets offended, he just leaves in the middle of the date. Even if the women rub him the wrong way or like crack a joke he doesn't understand, he just comes off as very oversensitive and impatient. Like, for example, one of the women asked him what his sign was, and he said it was Capricorn. And the woman says, oh, they won't get along because of this. And then he responds, "You're into judgments? That's not good." And he leaves. And I just thought, she was just joking. Like that was my impression. But like the fact that he just gets up and leaves, it's just like it just shows that he's very, you know, oversensitive maybe. So Simo is initially talking seriously with two women, that's Yasmin and Hajar. The crazy similarity, as with Hajar, is that they're both Moroccan and that they both have a twin sibling. But he seems to form a better connection with Yasmin at first because they bond over having divorced parents. He sends her a bouquet of flowers, Yasmin, which is something that she's very excited to receive. He tells her he sent them to her because it was her birthday and because she's become someone he holds dear. We see here that Simu is capable of showing kindness and affection. Yasmin says she likes his self confidence and how he wears his heart on his sleeve, but interestingly, she adds that his honesty is a little scary. Their pods meeting ends, and in his interview, he states that he has a unique connection with Yasmin, but Hajar isn't giving him any signs at this point. This quickly changes, though, in his next pod's date with Hajar, who has gifted him a rose with her perfume on it, but this rose was from the bouquet he had sent to Yasmin. Simu asks her where she got the flower from, to which Hajar tells him it was the mysterious guy who gave it to Yasmin. At this point, Hajar did not know that Simu was the one who gave her the bouquet, Yasmin. He didn't know that Simu had given Yasmin the bouquet, and Simu reveals that it was him. Hajar's surprised and feels embarrassed, but surprisingly, Simu appears to be touched by the gift and says that his flower with her perfume on it means that they are one. Hajar then tells him that he is her number one, and he's the only guy she's made a move on in the pods. This feels like the turning point for Simu when deciding between Yasmin and Hajar. Like, Yasmin at this point didn't gift anything to him or make him feel special. We can see maybe some jealousy from Simu when Shafiq walks into the men's quarters and shows everyone that Nour had given him a book with her perfume on it. Simu like takes the book, smells it, and then he says, "That's not a nice perfume, by the way. That's a stupid perfume." Like, okay, thanks for your input, Simu. It just came off as very insecure, but I felt like it just showed that he was feeling jealous that, he had just given Yasmin a bouquet of flowers and she hasn't given him anything in return. So it just comes off as jealousy, insecurity. Anyway, the next time Yasmin and Simu meet again, Simu asks her how her birthday was, and she shares that she told everyone about the flowers that he gave her, but she didn't tell them who it was out of respect in case he was dating other girls. And then he goes, "Out of respect for you or for me?" He brings up how she's dating other guys too and tells her, "I don't feel special." And then Yasmin responds, "If you want to feel special, be special," which I was like, damn, girl. Simu gets up and the two drift apart. In her interview, Yasmin says she saw a side of Simu she was surprised by because that side of him is toxic. And she's right. Simu now turns all his attention to Hajar. In their next meeting, the one he has with Hajar and the pods, Simu has gifted her heart-shaped balloons. He also sent her a letter. He tells her, quote, "You made me feel comfortable, you're relaxed, you're Moroccan." Then he asks her, "What can shock Hajar?" And she tells him, "If you leave me for no reason, because that is where I'm broken." And then she asks him out of the blue, what does he think about a bachelorette party? And Simu says, I guess seeing it from his perspective, he would love to go to Miami like for a bachelor party. And then she says she'd like to do something crazy, something like having the last taste of a cake before having to stick to a diet, as in do something super crazy. I just have to say this was a wild statement to make, given the society that they come from and how Arab men tend to be more conservative and traditional. I was really surprised to hear her say that, and I wasn't surprised at all by how Simu responded. He took like great offense to it. And he told her that this doesn't align with his principles. Then he tells her, you were, like, literally quote, he goes, "You were always wonderful until you said what you said right now." And he tells her it's disrespectful to herself and to him. She apologizes, but he's having a hard time letting it go and says first she has to be sorry to herself and then to him. He becomes really moody and Hajar continues apologizing. This incident should have been the end for them, in my opinion, because it clearly shows that Hajar is more of a free spirit, kind of like Karma, and not as traditional or conservative as Simu. They seem to lead very different lifestyles, but what they really differ in are the values that they live by. To my surprise, though, Simu is able to get past this. The next time they meet in the pods, it still feels like they're on shaky ground because of the bachelor party comment. She asks him if he wants to talk about it or move on and tells him that she has already apologized. She describes what she says as a bad joke, and then he responds that it wasn't a joke, and she repeats it was a bad joke and tries to explain that, that's her personality to joke and stuff. She then says that she likes how he stopped her when he didn't like what she was saying. It really feels like she's trying to appease him at this point. But Seymour repeats that he didn't like what happened, that she disrespected her and disrespected him and yada yada yada, disrespected their roots and traditions, and everything is like the world is ending over the comment she made. Hajar asks if they can move on, and Simu surprisingly finally is able to move on, and he tells her he really likes her, he wants to be with her and like spending time with her. She asks if, he's forgiven her, and he says he does, otherwise he literally wouldn't be sitting with her in the pods. So Simu says that for him, respect comes first, and that is all he's asking for. Now, given how Simu has acted with other women in the pods, I was sure he was going to end it with Hajar and just walk out. But to my surprise, he forgave her and continued talking to her. And I wonder if this was because maybe Hajar was the only girl left for him to talk to, so he chose to be more mature in this moment. Hajar was also the only woman to give him a gift, which was, that single rose with a perfume on it. So that gesture might have had a lasting effect on him because he had told Yasmin how he didn't feel special around her. So, maybe it was also Hajar just making him feel special that gave him more patience and the ability to like not just get up and leave and quit. So, Simu feels like he has chemistry with Hajar and tells her he will be there for her, support her, show her light when she sees dark, but says he needs respect in return. He proposes to her and promises to do his best as her partner to heal her wounds and so on, but Simu, how can you heal her wounds when you haven't healed your own wounds? Like, make it make sense. Anyway, Hodger's emotional over his speech and accepts his proposal. I just have to say, his speech was full of empty promises, and that wasn't hard to see. Their first reveal goes very well. Both seem happy with how they look, and Simu immediately tells her she is so beautiful, quote, a Moroccan beauty, then immediately gets on his knee and proposes with the ring, which she accepts. What's funny is after meeting each other, Hajar describes him to be arrogant, but thinks that adds to them being a power couple somehow, given her own personality. Yeah, I don't know. In the next phase, while staying at the resort, Hajar and Simu run into an issue literally right away because Simu wants to live in Morocco because of his business, but Hajar prefers Dubai because her life is there while only her family is in Morocco. It's so crazy to me how they made it this far without discussing this critical detail. Aren't these the questions you're supposed to sort out in the pods? Again, this is the second couple where we're like, "Hello, why didn't you have this conversation earlier on?" Anyway, Hajar says she's worried about losing her freedom, but she should have been worried way earlier in the pod because Simu's obviously a conservative guy, and I feel like she would lose her freedom just by marrying him, and that becomes pretty clear as we move on. Simu tells her that freedom is to be with your family. Instead of continuing this conversation, Hajar changes the subject to passion. She wants to know what Simu's passion is, and oh God, he says passion is to have a good life. This is another example of how a couple is just dodging the difficult conversations rather than resolving it and saving each other's time. In Simu's interview, he does acknowledge that they have different perspectives on some things, but he said, that doesn't make her a bad person or anything. Hajar tells Simu he has a big ego, and surprisingly, Simu responded saying that he's trying to fix it, which shows that sometimes he is capable of acknowledging his faults rather than firing back. Then the waitress comes with some food, and Hajar responds, "It's too late. I'm almost done," which was a very rude gesture. And I was so impressed that Simu called her out for that and, told her that it was inappropriate. He tells her she shouldn't have done that in his presence and that he'll leave the restaurant. This moment definitely won some brownie points for Simu, but Hajar says sometimes she can be rude with people, which was a huge turnoff to hear because it shows she's aware of this behavior of hers and she's not ashamed of treating people poorly. They're seriously just both toxic in different ways. Like, I guess this goes back to them being a power couple in some form, based on being toxic, I guess. This is obvious. It's just obvious that, Hajar, um, yeah, I just felt like she was really toxic from that moment on. And she even says in her interview, we'll either drive each other mad or fall madly in love, and I agree with that. Hajar asks Simu what is forbidden for him, and he tells her nothing is forbidden. But when she asks if his wife can have a night out, he says he's not for it. Hajar tells him, she thinks he has trust issues, which he denies and says that's, respect and values of the family. Simu believes that once they are married, they should do everything together, and there would be no reason for his wife to go out alone without him, again, reinstating his super traditional and conservative views. I think by now it has become clear that they are both polar opposites in their perspectives towards life. Simu is too traditional and Hajar is the complete opposite. She would obviously have issues being married to a guy like him because she said earlier that, she would be worried about losing her freedom, and that's exactly what marriage to Simu would be for her, or that's what it's looking like at least. When there's a group gathering where all the couples get together, there is an incident where Hajar tries to fix Nour's dress from the back, which has a stain on it. And after she fixes it, Simu tells Nour to turn around and to check it him like he's trying to check it himself, which embarrasses both Hajar and Nour. Hajar tells him, that she's already cleaned it and confronts him. She's really upset by it. And she's like, why'd you tell Noor to turn around, when I've already cleaned the stain? Simu doesn't take any accountability and tells Audrey his intentions were not bad, but she tells him he should apologize, and he refuses to apologize. I really feel like Simu was in the wrong here, even if he didn't mean anything by it. Like, Audrey still felt disrespected, and he should have at least shown some remorse. But then Simu gets into a fight with Shafiq over a misunderstanding, and Hajar literally fails to intervene or do anything to support Simu, which he takes great offense to, which is ironic. You kind of like, how do you expect support from your soon to be wife when, you weren't showing her any respect just a moment earlier? There's a scene where Noor is sitting with Hajar and tells her how she loves how she's just sitting back while all the chaos is happening, like while Shafiq and Seymour are fighting. Hajar says, why should I interfere? And she's still stuck on their problem from earlier and how he didn't apologize. When the next day arrives, Hajar is still fuming over the dress incident and plans to confront Simu about it, but while she's waiting for him, the producers tell her they just received a call that Simu had left. I think it's possible that Simu felt more offended at Hajar not taking his side or doing anything during his fight with Shafiq, while he saw Dunya there by Shafiq's side, so for her not to provide the same support for him probably bruised his ego. But I think by this point, Simu also might have had more clarity about how this relationship with Hajar wouldn't have really lasted because they were just so different in their perspectives and their lifestyles, especially where to live. The fight was like the final straw for him, and he walked out because he just didn't see a future. Hajar quickly brushes it off, and she says it's his loss and stands her ground on not interfering the other day between the two men because she stands by saying it was none of her business. What's really sad is the show cuts to a clip of the two in the pods where Simu asked her the question, "What can shock Hajar?" And she responded, "If you leave me for no reason." Because this is where I'm broken, and that's exactly what he ends up doing. He leaves her for no reason, and that's why I said that his proposal promises were all full of shit. Hajar says it just shows he's childish and not ready for responsibility, which is so true. Hajar and Simu's story comes to an end here, and my final thoughts are that Simu was a troubled individual from the very beginning, and he displays a very toxic personality. In the pods, he showed his lack of patience when speaking to other women. If they even slightly said something he didn't like or cracked a bad joke, he'd get up and leave rather than resolve the issue. He also failed to discuss any hard topics regarding lifestyles, and like for example, which country to live in, which further weakened his chances in finding a good match. I genuinely believe the only reason he got so far with Hajar was because she was the only woman he was talking to that made him feel special by giving him that rose. We were able to see how he showed more patience with her and gave her a chance, but in the end, it just couldn't work out because they were just too different in terms of their values. So now let's move on to Nour and Mido. So Nour was initially talking to Shafiq, but once he made up his mind about Dunia, he returned the book to Nour, the one that she'd gifted him, and they both parted ways. Now, Noor then starts meeting Mido in the pods, and Mido is also coming into the meeting with Noor having parted ways with someone who was Asma, and he felt really rejected by her when she chose Khatab without having a conversation with him first. He's clearly bothered about this, and it shows because his energy is pretty much, it's very off when he's meeting Noor. He explains to her how he is feeling off and feeling jealous of the other guys who have succeeded in getting a match. Anyway, the two of them start to talk, and Mito thinks Noor brings out his mature side, which he likes. He says she made him feel safe, and in their next meeting, he gifts her flowers and a star necklace. She had gifted him a cupcake and a fruit plate, so the two are vibing, and Mito decides to propose to her in the pods, and she accepts. I was very surprised that Mito even proceeded with Noor, knowing she was a model and would likely be taller than him. He even acknowledges that his height might be a problem in his interview, but it's a chance he decides to take, I guess. The doors open in their first face to face reveal, and you know, it was such an awkward reveal. It was exactly what I expected, just given his short height. Her face looks so disappointed right away. They hug and greet each other. His head basically comes up just a little bit over her shoulders, like it's so awkward, and her face just says it all. But Mito likes what he sees. He tells her she's very beautiful and pretty, and to my surprise, she tells him he's very handsome, but it comes off as a comment made out of pity, or maybe she was trying to be polite because it's painfully obvious that she isn't impressed with him, most likely because of his height. It's all about the height. It's just, Mito then brings out the ring and asks her if she will marry him, and she says yes. Like, that was pretty surprising. I didn't think she would, but she did. The two hug and part ways, and Noor doesn't share much in her interview about her first meeting with Mito, other than, she says, let's see what the future holds. There were a lot of comments online saying that Noor only wanted to go on vacation, and that's why she accepted the proposal, which I also believe to be the case. But it could also be she wanted to give it a shot despite how unimpressed she seemed with his looks. So when they move on to the next phase of the experiment and arrive at the resort, Noor looks so disinterested in him while sitting with me sitting down to eat together. Mido seems to be the only one who's trying to keep the conversation going, and she responds to his questions with minimal effort. I also noticed she's not wearing the star necklace he gave her anymore, which may or may not mean something. Mito basically brings up her eye contact eventually because he notices that she isn't making eye contact with him, and Nour says if she's feeling shy or awkward, she doesn't look into the person's eyes, and she acknowledges that, she's doing that now with him. It's pretty clear she feels awkward and disinterested in him. Mito says in his interview that he's getting negative vibes from her and he doesn't know why, but the why is pretty obvious because she's just not that into you. Um, and he had enough self awareness in the pods about his height, so again, I'm confused as to why he's confused. Maybe because Noor hasn't directly said anything to him that would indicate her lack of interest in him, but even without words, her body language is screaming pretty obvious signs. He confronts Noor and tells her he doesn't feel like she is excited to see him, and Noor acts surprised and Mito asks her what she's hiding, and she continues to act confused. This is why it really just seems like she wanted to go on vacation and have a good time at the resort because everyone can tell she's not interested in Mito. On their second date at the resort, Mito doesn't pull out the chair for Noor to sit on like he previously did, and Noor brings it up, but it's clear Mito has changed his attitude towards her because she isn't opening up to him. Mito tells her he feels confused, that her priorities or her lifestyle is throwing him off, and Noor tells him she doesn't want to spend time together having a bad time. They seem to momentarily light up, and Noor does seem concerned, given his energy changing towards her, because she wants to have a good time at the resort. But she doesn't understand how her own disinterest in him is driving his mood to change for the worst. Or maybe she does um, maybe she does. I don't know if she does understand or if she doesn't understand. Like, we don't know because she won't admit it. When the group meets for the first time in the resort, Hajar says in her individual interview that Noor is a bit out of Mito's league, and Noor acts like it when she barely spends any time with Mito. Shafiq tells Mito in the gathering that, he thinks Mito is much better than Noor because he feels Noor is too much, and he also brings up how Noor barely sits with Mito and keeps leaving his side. He thinks they aren't looking like a good match for each other, and I think it's pretty obvious to everyone in the group gathering that Noor and Mito are not a match. Later, when Shafiq and Noor are talking, Mito takes note of Noor's laughter and says in his interview that, she seems comfortable talking to Shafiq and completely different from how she is with himself. It's kind of sad to see Mito mostly standing alone or sitting alone throughout the group gathering, but this is definitely a turning point for Mito, who up until now was still somewhat tolerant of Noor. Even going into the group gathering, you can tell Noor's priorities are different because she said she was looking forward to showing everyone what they missed out on. After the gathering, Mito says in his interview that he and Noor are not a match, that she's very cold emotionally, and that she wants someone to keep giving and doesn't acknowledge it, which is true from what we've been seeing. So the next morning, when Noor meets him, the vibe is already off, and you can tell Mito is upset. Mito asks her if she had breakfast, and she said no because she was under the impression they would eat together. But Mito has already eaten breakfast. He asks her if she stayed up late with Hajar, and Noor says she was upset and Hajar didn't want her to go to bed like that. The way he responds to Noor comes off sarcastic, and Noor tells him she feels like he is mocking her. He denies this, and they briefly discuss the fight the other day between Shafiq and Simo. In his individual interview, Mito says that it's obvious Shafiq and Noor have something for each other, and he brings up how Shafiq was the only one in the pods to get a gift from Noor, and that when Noor met him, she didn't gift him anything, which isn't true because Noor sent over a cupcake and some fruit during one of their meetings. But I guess he was talking about like physical gifts, like um, something that wasn't food. Who knows? Mito's just coming off really insecure and paranoid, but at the same time, given how disinterested Noor is in him, I can understand why he's behaving like this. He also points out how Noor completely changed when she met Shafiq at the group gathering, which is true. I really think the group gathering settled things for Mito in his mind because Noor was barely by his side and he was probably able to see how the other couples were much closer together than he and Noor were. Mito describes how when Noor comes to him, she's very quiet. He tells Noor that their character is very different, that it's better to go their separate ways than disrespect each other. Noor tells him she can't keep repeating herself and giving excuses, that she feels very small. She tries to speak more to Mito to basically give her side of the story, but Mito isn't interested and gets up to leave, leaving Noor to sit by herself. I don't know what Noor expected. Like, I just really feel like she was being very dishonest this entire time because if everybody can tell you're not into him, why not just admit it, you know? And she wasn't admitting it. So in her interview, Noor says that, you know, if you can't confront others, that you're a weak person and a coward. She describes Mido as being very childish. I can't say I agree. You know, I think Mido was really trying, but she just wasn't into him, and it was very clear. So it just comes off that Noor was trying to keep pretending for whatever reason. The scene then cuts to the girls having their own get together and the men having their own get together. Karma asks Noor how her connection with Mido was and if it was easy to talk to each other. And Noor says, quote, funny Mido isn't funny anymore, referring to his mood changing towards her. She thinks Mido is jealous and says in her interview that she feels like he needs a babysitter after seeing how immature he is. But again, how can you blame the guy when you literally ignored him for most of the time you were at the resort? And the guys get together. Mito tells the other men that he's leaving because it's too much to deal with Noor. He says he tried everything, but she stays in her room all day doing her hair and makeup. And at night, she says she can't go out because it's hot, etc. Mito says she needs a slap to wake her up to the real life that, you know, she thinks life is artificial and compares her to Barbie, like a doll. And the men support his decision, saying, you know, he did his part. Karma even tells Noor, you know, during their get together, the women, that she felt like she wasn't so comfortable with Mito, which further establishes how everyone looking in on the outside could tell there were problems between the two. So basically, Mito tells the guys he's tried his best to make her happy, but he got nothing in return, that she chose to be alone all the time, and he continues to think Noor has something for Shafiq. He packs his bags and leaves without telling Noor. When Noor finds out he left, she just vents about how his behavior was childish and unmanly. But as much as I like Noor, I kind of side with Mito because Noor wasn't being honest with her feelings and everyone could see it. So she really comes off as dishonest regarding her own intentions. I also think Mito should have been more alert in reading the signs, and to a certain extent, he was because he could pick up on the negative vibes, but it seems to have taken him longer than it should have to realize Noor wasn't into him. So, thanks so much for listening to my review of these three couples from Love Is Blind Habibi, and that wraps it up. I'll see you next time. Thanks.